p.m. November the 12th, 2020. Now, is Jalise? Is that, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Jalise.
Jalise, could you please do the roll call, and then we'll do anyway, go call the roll call, please.
Christy Euclair.
Aye.
Are we supposed to state who's in the
Here.
room as well?
I'm
Yes.
here.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I am.
you have to sit.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm late. Okay, let's start over. Hi. I am alone in the room, but there's other people in the house.
Peter Belo,
I am alone in a room.
Brian Boyle, Alan David, Kathleen Gorman, Julie Hammond, Michael Mascola,
I am here and I am alone in the house.
Todd McCormick,
I am here. There are other people in the house, but I am alone in the room.
Sue Sherman,
I'm alone in this room. I'm not at my own house, but there are other people in the house.
and Phil Sherwood.
I am here, alone in the room. There are other family members in the house.
Okay. You know what? I was supposed to read this before the roll call, so I'm going to read it now, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. As chair of the Timberlane Regional School District Budget Committee Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. There is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by audio and video utilizing a Zoom webinar platform where all members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and view by logging into www.timberlane.net/ZoomBudCom. B, we have given notice to the public of this necessary information for accessing this meeting. This information has been provided along with the agenda and posted to the board's website at www.timberlane.net. C, we have provided a phone number for the public to alert this public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. The phone number is 603-382-6541, extension 3955. D, we will adjourn the meeting and reschedule if the public is unable to access the meeting. Additionally, all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. We will begin the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, which we've already done. When members state their presence, they must also state whether there is anyone in the room with them during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. And with that, I would ask Peter, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. I pledge allegiance. Oh, sorry. I was already standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks for the flag there, Dean.
Yep, thanks, Dean. Next, we're going to move. Well, so before we get into approval of minutes, Phil brought up a good point, and I agree with it. And so I'm just going to make the call. I'd like to let the folks that are on here to present their budgets kind of move up a little bit in the agenda. So after we do delegations and individuals before the administrative report, I want to let our presenters have an opportunity to jump right into their budgets, and then we'll continue on with the meeting after that. Okay, everyone? That way we don't keep them as long. And we really do appreciate you guys being on here tonight to present to us. So with that, let's move to the approval of the minutes.
I make a
which
motion
you
to
will
approve.
have in your agenda packet. Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a second. Okay.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay to make a brief adjustment to reflect that Julie Hammond entered the meeting at the time, which she did, which I'm not sure was in the draft minutes.
Yes. Okay. Do we need a
So
motion to make that change?
If it's just by general consent, I think we can make the change as long as Jaleese has it. I believe it's around
Yep.
7:20.
Yep, I agree. Okay. And also, Julie is now on this meeting as well. Hi,
Right.
Julie.
Hello.
Okay. Any discussion? Any other changes? That looks good to me. All right. With that, let's do a roll call to accept these minutes, please.
Christy Claire,
Yes.
Peter Belo,
Sure.
Michael Mascola,
Yes.
Julie Hammond,
Here.
Todd McCormick,
Yes.
Sue Sherman,
Yes.
Phil Sherwood.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have correspondence. Jeff, do you have any correspondence before I read the letter that Alan wrote to the group?
Correspondence I have is that which you have, which you're about to read.
Okay. So I received, Jeff and I received an email earlier today. Unfortunately, Alan, due to personal reasons, feels the need to step down. So we are going to accept that. I don't know that we really need to do that. We've already notified the Board of Selectmen in Sandown to get on the ball of trying to find somebody else. And I am trying to find it here because I just wanted to read it. Let's see here. Here we go. Todd McCormick, I regret to inform you that I will be stepping down immediately from the Budget Committee as of today. Personal reasons lead me to this decision. It was a pleasure working with all of you. I know I am leaving the Budget Committee in good hands. Thank you, Alan David. So I'll speak for all of us and say thank you, Alan. It was a pleasure working alongside you, and I hope things turn out okay for you. And that I mean, I've talked to Alan. I know work's really busy for him right now, and he was finding it difficult to make meetings. So I'm sure we'll have a new person from Sandown soon. Maybe not by our next meeting, but just on that note, we're kind of thinned down a little bit. So if you guys can make the next meeting, that would be great. Just so we don't have to not have a quorum, if possible. So that's all for correspondence. We will go ahead and open it up to delegates and individuals. You know, we've made it possible for anyone who wants to do the little hand raise in the participants group. We're more than willing to listen to anything that the public who's viewing this meeting has to say.
Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, but our viewing public should be able to pull up the participants menu, find their name under attendees, and if they mouse over or right-click over their name, there should be a feature which actually says raise hand. And if they would like to speak, that would be the way to alert the board of that. I don't see any right now, so if you want to give it just a few more moments.
Okay. So moving on, next on the agenda would have been administrative report, but we're going to jump to new business and go ahead and do curriculum and professional learning, which I believe is Sandy. So the floor is yours, Sandy.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I propose to start with curriculum. I actually have two budgets this evening to present to you. And thank you, Dean. It looks like you are looking at my summary sheet that identifies lines that are either above or below $1,000 increase or decrease. So just before I get started, just wanted to speak a little bit to kind of the process for both of these budgets, both curriculum and professional learning. When I came before this committee about a year ago, I spoke to just in general, a decreased need across the district in our textbook lines. In terms of our curriculum implementation, we for many years have been moving away from traditional textbooks and increasing our use of online info access resources. So you'll see that general trend again this year in the budgets that I'm bringing to you. You will also see some increases in our book lines with regard to specific programs that we're using and implementing at the elementary level. But really my approach to budgeting, where we didn't have specific itemized accounts or contracts or items, was really to look at a spending trend analysis that I went back about 5 years and tried to make really informed, conservative and responsible decisions around budgeting in each of those lines. That being said, I do want to acknowledge that last year some of our lines did go underspent due to the pandemic and due to COVID. So I'll identify those lines if and when we come to those, but we had allocated certain monies to be spent in the spring around some testing programs, around some info access programs that are implemented in April through May. Also around professional learning. We have a professional development day traditionally in March. That did not happen. So when we look at our spending trend analysis, that was taken into account looking at last year. So I'm going to start with the curriculum budget, and I'm just going to go line by line. I'm not sure how traditionally you've been doing this, but that'll be my approach. So please stop me if you have any questions. So the first significant differential that you'll see is in curriculum development and administration at the elementary level. So that is down 5,000. Again, that was through a spending trend analysis of fees that have traditionally been associated with that line. We have moved away from curriculum development. We were in a very active phase about 5 or 6 years ago that really started about 5 or 6 years ago, which was a comprehensive district-wide curriculum rewrite, pre-K-12. We've moved out of the curriculum development phase more to implementation. So as a result, some of the costs associated with those lines at both the elementary and secondary level have decreased. So the first two lines that you see, the first one is the elementary line and the second one is the secondary line for curriculum development. Those are both down 5,000 each respectively. The next line that you'll see is elementary instructional supplies. That is down a little over $9,000. That is due to a decrease due to a one-time expenditure connected to a pre-K reading and math program and some kits that we purchased for our pre-K programs across the district in this year's budget. So that is where you will see that decrease. The next line is in instructional supplies at the secondary level. Again, I lowered this $2,000 just looking at a spending trend analysis and trying to anticipate what we might be spending our monies on. When we're talking about instructional supplies, we know that we have a lot more of a focus right now in remote needs for remote learning. So some of those more traditional instructional supplies that we might have previously purchased for our classrooms are not needed in the same manner that they were in the past. So you'll see that decrease. Going down, you'll see elementary textbooks. So again, we have been moving just over time away from traditional textbooks. What I found in this is my second year really working with these budgets in this manner. And as I've been both developing these budgets, but also implementing them, interacting with them over the past 2 years, it's become apparent that some of the purchases that we had been allocating for textbooks were really more books. So some of our summer reading books that we traditionally purchase for our elementary schools, some guided reading books that we had been implementing across grade levels, not traditional textbooks. So you're going to see a $15,000 decrease here, but some of that money has been reallocated in the book line, which we're going to see a little bit farther below where you will see an increase. So there is sort of a trade-off between those two lines. But again, it was trying to be more purposeful in aligning what we are budgeting in these lines with the true function and object codes and what would fall in those budget lines. And so moving on, and actually I apologize, I just want to go back to the textbooks. We have been talking about in our curriculum and assessment committee and amongst our curriculum leadership team, researching new math programs. The current program that we have had for about 7 years now. Our contract with that textbook company did expire. We are in a 1-year renewal right now. We anticipate that we will renew again for next year, but we are actively looking at new programs, textbook programs, but we do not anticipate purchasing anything next year. That'll be a multi-year process. So if and when we come to that time, we will come back with an increase in this line, but until then, we do not anticipate any significant purchases in textbooks for elementary. Moving down, books and info resources. So this is where you'll see the largest and most significant increase. So this is really coming from two cost items. The first is about $84,500. It's directly aligned to the Fountas and Pinnell guided reading collection for grades K through 3. Guided reading is a fundamental component of our reading instruction at the elementary level, and it's very closely aligned to our curriculum implementation. So what we have discovered across our district is that some of our schools have larger resource banks around guided reading, but there was a significant need for these resources and a commonality, equity in resources across our 4 towns and in our schools. Our curriculum assessment committee has been reviewing the proposal to purchase these guided reading resources. Due to COVID, unfortunately, that committee hadn't met from March of last year up until September. So we were a little bit behind our traditional or our proposed timeline of exploring these resources, bringing a proposed set of resources to curriculum and assessment for their approval prior to budgeting. So what I will tell you is that the curriculum committee last month did discuss these resources. There was a general consensus to move forward with them. That being said, our elementary curriculum coordinators are still looking at a couple of other programs that might be viable options. What the curriculum assessment committee recommendation was to budget for the Fountas and Pinnell classroom guided reading books. That is the higher price point. We're fully supportive of this program. It's really the most widely used in most elementary schools who have implemented guided reading. Fountas and Pinnell have been instrumental in that instructional approach. That being said, we are looking at other programs that might be more cost effective. So that $84,500 is really the highest possible price point that we would incur due to the guided reading resources. We would, should we find something that's more cost effective, CNA is looking at this again in December and then finally in January, we would lower that cost in our budget. But we were up against a time crunch. So I did want to acknowledge that with this group, just to let you know where that process is and what our reasoning was as a committee. So that is the higher cost there that you'll see in this line. The other one is $15,000 that I reallocated from the elementary textbook line, because that $15,000 has been allocated for summer reading at the elementary level. So whereas those are not textbooks, but more books, I've adjusted them accordingly. So that is a trade-off between those two lines that you'll see. Oh, you can stop me if you have any questions. Okay, I'll keep going. So following books and info resources, you'll start to see the info access fee lines. So at the elementary level, we do have another increase here. And there are some programs that went up in cost that we've been implementing for several years in the district, but there is a new program in there, which is Symphony Math. Again, I just spoke about guided reading. Symphony Math is connected to an instructional approach of guided math instruction. that really pertains to mathematical modeling and supporting students through thinking about their math reasoning skills to make connections and really develop a coherent foundational knowledge of the sequence of math learning at the early grade levels. So we have been implementing Symphony Math as a pilot this year across our elementary schools. There was no cost to the district this year. We've had some training. We just actually had our teachers go through some training on our most recent professional development day on November 3rd. But we will continue to implement that this year as a pilot, and the feedback has been great. It's research-based, has really great reviews, has been going very well in our elementary schools. So that cost has bumped up the elementary info access line from where it was about a year ago. On the other end of it, secondary line is down a little bit, and that is primarily due to a decrease in the cost of what we had referred to as blended learning tools. But we used to use Achieve 3000, as I think many of you will remember. Achieve was replaced by News ELA or News ELA, and that is a bit of a more cost-effective program. So you'll see that decrease in that line. And finally, the last line where you're going to see an increase is in district-wide info access. So due to remote learning, there were several programs in the spring that were made free to all school districts around the country, and they were widely used. One of those is Screencastify, which is an app that can be added on to Chrome, to Google Chrome, and it allows teachers to create videos of their computer screen. So as they are planning lessons for their students, if they have a presentation, if they have delivered a lesson, they can create narrated videos and save those and push those out to their students. So that was really a pivotal resource last spring during remote learning. Our teachers have continued to ask for that. Unfortunately, like many resources that were made free to districts in the spring, it is no longer free. So we are looking to budget for that moving forward because it has been widely used. And Tang Math, which actually has a reading program as well, that is an enrichment online app that supports critical thinking and problem solving skills across both math and reading at the early grade levels. So that's a kind of general summary of the curriculum budget. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have before we jump into professional learning.
Todd, I have a question.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yep.
Go ahead, Julie.
I just wanted to double check on under the new K-3 guided reading collection. Did you say that the estimate you'd gotten was 84,500?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and then you had basically a swap for those summer books of 15,000.
Right.
But the number I saw there, I don't have it now. He flipped that screen, but I think it was only 95. Why shouldn't that be?
Mine shows, yeah, it should be 99.5. It should be. Mine does show 99.5. I'm not sure why that's showing that.
Oh, okay. All right.
The copy I'm looking at, you're absolutely right. The copy I am looking at that I have in front of me does say 99.5. So I wonder if that was,
Maybe
not
that was
sure.
an older one or
yeah,
something.
I'm not sure what
Okay.
happened there. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, the total amount,
Any other questions for Sandy?
if I may, this is Jeff, the total amount is 99.5, the increase is 95.5.
Right.
Oh,
That, right.
okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
All right. I was just looking at the cover sheet that she had.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Tricky,
you, Jeff,
Cindy.
for pointing that out. Yep.
Any other questions for Sandy on curriculum? Okay, Sandy, you can move on to professional services.
Okay. Professional services is fairly straightforward. This primarily was due to really just looking at spending trend analysis in each line. And there were a couple lines that had been misplaced in the curriculum budget. And so I worked with Jeff to move those back over to professional learning where they belonged. So we'll speak to some of those when we come across them as well. So just looking at the first decrease, I have dropped our tuition reimbursement for elementary by 1,000. Just again, due to a spending trend analysis of requests for reimbursement from our elementary educators. Conversely, I did increase that similar line for our paras and our quotas. We did over expend that line slightly. So, and there has been an increased request from our paras for tuition reimbursement. So that's why you'll see a slight increase in that line. The next line is down 10,000. So the in-service for professional staff, this is the secondary professional staff line, this first one that you see that's down 10,000. This was lowered. What I discovered in working on these budgets, and again, kind of becoming more familiar with them as I've been working with them for the past 2 years, is that this line had been previously misplaced in the curriculum budget line. And because it was in there and not in professional learning, it had been carried over for multiple years with $1 a year. And really the cost for secondary professional learning and professional development days had been charged to either a district line, or in some cases, we were in a bind when we had a secondary charge and we had money in elementary. So I did work with Jeff. We moved this to its correct place and correct budget. As a result, I did some shifting. So this has been, kind of moved around, and you'll see a balance, the one just below this. And I apologize, this is the elementary line. The secondary line right below it is where there's an increase because it was carried at $1 in curriculum. So it's sort of a trade-off. Rather than having $20,000 in one, we've split the two to more accurately align our elementary costs and our secondary costs in their appropriate lines, if that makes sense. So, and you'll see the increase of $9,999 again, because we had been carrying $1 in that line. So that's why you'll see the 10,000 and the 9,999. In service for assistant principals, again, looking at our costs over the past several years, and the one below that, so this is elementary, and then the 3.7 line, that's in service for assistant principals at the secondary level. Looking at spending over the past several years, we have underspent that line, so I dropped them accordingly. Moving down to professional services and professional development, due to a focus on our strategic plan, which calls for more self-guided, job-embedded, internal professional development opportunities for our staff. We have been bringing in less, or fewer, I should say, contracted speakers to do on-site training for our whole staff. We've shifted more to a model of personalized professional development, and that has allowed us to bring in multiple smaller opportunities, a speaker or multiple speakers who would present during the same time frame, and teachers have opportunities to select accordingly. That's resulted in a decrease in the overall cost. We're not necessarily flying, big speakers from across the country and putting them up in hotels and paying for their room and board and all of that. So there has been a cost savings in that line as a result. This one is really, again, just looking at the cost of our supplies and our mentoring program. So I dropped that line by 1,000, and I believe that is it. So as a whole, that budget is down slightly from where it was last year.
All right, do we have any questions for Sandy?
Nothing?
Going once? I don't think so. Thank you,
Okay.
Sandy.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank
I
you.
can stick around if you'd like me
Absolutely.
to, Todd, or no?
No,
want me to hang
you
out? We're
are.
good? All right.
Absolutely. I'm sure it's dinner. I'm sure it's dinner time. So go
All right.
enjoy your family. Thanks,
Thank
Sandy.
you, everybody. Good to see you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Moving on, we're going to go with Don. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I think what you have in front of you is what I'm looking at, which is the summary of the proposed budget. Are you looking at that too? The
Yes.
the report here was based on a population very similar next year to what we have now. We were 1,062 entering this year. We'll be projecting 1,059 students next year. The current budget is $598,002, and the proposed budget is $620,178, which is a decrease of between 3 and 4% of $22,176. I could go through the decreases. I think probably be better to focus on the increases. If you have questions about the decreases later, you can ask me questions. So if you go down to the second item, you'll see a general increase, an increase in our supply budget. Last year, we had left the budget process thinking that was in there. Luckily, in a way, things have, as far as budgetary wise, we are using fewer supplies because we're teaching predominantly online. What we've done here is basically put back in what we had proposed last year for our supplies for the high school, and because we're preparing basically with the assumption that next year we'll have a normal year. And this is not out of line with what we had traditionally been spending. So that's why that appears as a $12,514 increase, which seems like quite a bit, but it's really zeroed out without us really being aware of that after all the discussion about the budget was done to reach a predetermined figure. I really wasn't a part of that conversation. I don't know. However, from the end of last year till now, our supply budget has been something that hasn't hurt us. Our lack of that figure isn't really hurting us at this point, and it won't until we get to the point that we have most of our kids back in school. Moving to the second page here, you'll see an increase in science books. Let me read you an executive summary that was prepared for me for this by Tim Guanci in our science department. In the fall of 2020, the high school lost access to our digital license for our biology textbook, Miller and Levine Biology. And access to the digital text was lost due to Flash no longer being supported by Pearson's platform, which was used by teachers and students to access the digital textbook through PowerSchool. After contacting Pearson, the high school was able to get access to an updated version of the textbook from Pearson for the remainder of this school year. But we needed to plan to replace the 270 student licenses for this upcoming, for this budget for 2021-22. So after looking at our current science book budget for 2021, we were able to put together a 2-year plan allocating funds to purchase 124 digital licenses that will be good for 6 years, starting on July 1st, 2021 from Pearson. And then we needed to budget for the remaining 146 licenses, which we could then purchase on July 1st out of this budget, out of the upcoming budget, allowing us to have 270 total licenses for the start of the 2021-22 school year, and that would be in place for 6 years. Breaking down the budget increase, each 6-year student license comes to $88.47. The high school will need an additional 146 6-year student licenses. And due to this current need, the budgeting of $12,962 in our science book line, is what you're seeing for the 2021, the 21-22 budget. If you were going to get textbooks, the physical textbooks would cost about $130 to $140 each. So this is a significantly more appropriate way to go about things, not only from a budgetary sense, but right now we'd be sunk if we were using those big books and kids were having to lug them everywhere all the time and using those. Those things are probably, too big for any book bag. They're just huge and impractical. We have the outdated, the older textbooks. They're about 12 years old that we keep in our library. But right now, all the teachers are using the online versions, and that will continue whether we are remote or in school. Because then the kids don't have to bring the books back and forth, and they're always kept current. So we'll be getting, up to date, the updated versions of the same textbook we'll be using this year and next, and starting to pay at the end of the school year. This year out of this year's budget, and then the remainder out of next year's budget. I don't know if you're able to follow all that. Sorry for it being a little confusing, but we see it as a kind of a no-brainer. It saves us money down the road and keeps us current with our needs for a biology textbook. Further down on that page, you'll see an increase for a program called No Red Ink, and do the same thing with that for you. Let me see if I can find that. No Red Ink is an online personalized adaptive program that provides mini lessons and practice and assessments for students who are working on grammar and usage, for the writing process, for competency, skill building work, and for SAT prep. And although teachers choose the skills that students have to work on, the students can personalize by choosing the content. For increased student engagement, the skill, practice, and assessment is designed in a unique way for each student by using his or her interests, their hobbies, and favorite celebrities, and even athletic figures. And students are able to work at a pace that meets their needs, starting at their current level of understanding and progressing as they master a skill. The program provides data reports so teachers can see how the students' skills are improving, give them feedback when they're stuck and they need extra support. No Red Ink Premium, compared to a free version, which we piloted, offers more in-depth program for students and teachers. There are more grammar and usage topics to choose from. And the writing skills topics are limited in the free version, but have 95 or more skills available in the premium. So that's what we're looking for. The guided writing increases from 1 to 9 different genres by going to the premium. And when students are completing anonymous peer writing reviews and self-writing views, there are more categories to choose from. So we're pretty excited about going in that direction. A lot of the changes we're looking for this year, you'll see, are technology based, because they're, one, they're helping in this situation, but two, they're being used to personalize the delivery. Let's go now to the next item on that page. This is something I'm not sure if Ken Henderson is going to put in his budget, but for now we have it in ours, which is for our art department. We're trying to get 5 new Apple iPads, which is used for art drawing. The cost is $5,500, but we're waiting to hear if it will be added to the technology budget, and that would be an increase of $2,700. On the next page, you'll see a replacement equipment for art, and really that's just something we have to do periodically to keep our pottery wheels, our potter's wheels on schedule, and it's time to replace them at this point. So that $1,800 is absolutely necessary for us because we have over 100 students taking pottery every year. The next one, we have replacement equipment. This one is something we approved last year, but we were not able to get going on it, got cut out of the budget. We had put together a 3-year plan for replacing our cafeteria tables. Again, we kind of lucked out because we're not using the tables because we can't socially distance using those tables. So we're using student desks, and we're using student desks out of classrooms that we can't use in the classrooms now because we have to have fewer desks in the classroom. So it's interesting the way it worked out that not having this in the budget didn't hurt us this year, but that's back in the budget. So next year would be the first year of the program, not the second. So it's still hopefully going to be a 3-year replacement program, and we're in no worse shape than we were when we agreed to do this originally last year. After a couple other decreases, you look at some lesser increases. We're looking to replace a portable projection screen in social studies. We have to increase the amount of money we put aside for our HiSET students for testing. Each student's testing in 5 areas costs about $125. It's $25 per test. However, sometimes there are retakes even. If they don't pass it the first time, you still have to pay another $25. So with the increase in students, we are asking for $3,500 more in that line. We also will need more prep materials. So $1,500 on the next item there are for the same kids that we teach in the evening that will need supplies to prepare them for those tests. Going down further, you'll see the library information access fees. These things are heavily used. A lot of the switches that we're making are helping us to have more kids have more access from more places. So whether it's for research pieces in American history or access to videos that we use in class, being able to pull them up digitally is a great advantage for teachers rather than having to keep track of physical products that wear down. So that's a $5,140 increase there. It's really, these things are often offset by decreases then in the other products that we would have bought instead. You also see in the library that there's a printer that they'd like to get, which could print some larger pieces, even poster size pieces that actually help us for things that we need around the building that oftentimes we have to purchase, whether they're posters for the hallways or things that happen in art class where kids develop something and the final product of it is a printing piece. So we're asking for $1,500 for a very useful library piece of equipment, a printer. The other increase that we have here is for equipment in the principal's suite. So assistant principal and principal offices have old furniture. I think the desk I'm using is about 23 years old and it's not in good shape. We have assistant principals who need cabinets that can lock files, things like that. So there's a $3,644 figure there for increases in that type of equipment. So that's that. Do you have any questions on any of that?
Thank you, Don. Any questions for Don, committee?
I do.
All right, Mr. Sherman.
Yeah. Dawn, go back to talk about the CAF tables, your plan there. Can we see that on the summary? So what's the total project? Even though it's 3 years, what's the total project? Is it 12,000 per year
Well,
for
we
3
have
years?
about, yes.
So did this
We're
get,
looking at about,
Did this get
This
in the
just got pushed
capital?
back.
Go
No,
ahead.
this was not a part of the capital improvement plan.
It should be, because it's over $10,000, but I'm not blaming anybody, but it should be there. It is an improvement to the
Well,
facility. But if the business manager or superintendent or whoever suggested that you not put in the CIP, that's a pretty big amount of money to put in your replacement account. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's a,
Jeff, can you address that?
you could approach this in a lot of ways. We thought a 3-year plan would be about what our tables would remain safe at that type of a pace.
Sure.
So we could bring that to capital improvement committee just as easily, but I didn't really want to have to wait in the pace that things get done with the capital improvement plan. That could be 5 years down the road when we get that.
I know, but you
I
put this
think
in
it's-
last year's budget and it got cut out, right? It got cut out of last year's budget?
Last
Did
year,
it?
I think it was
I don't think
supported
so.
here at this level, but I think it got pulled out later.
Right.
Anyway, it was what I proposed last year, and in that conversation, you were supportive of it at that time.
Well, I wasn't on the
Sue, are
budget
you
committee.
saying that
That
all
said-
expenses over $10,000 need to go in the capital improvement plan?
Equipment and facilities improvement, yes, that's the plan, that's in the plan. Whether this district's going to follow that from this point forward, I don't know. But had that been all I'm saying, Dawn, is had that been in the CIP, you would have had more support to keep that in the budget because it had been in the CIP. It wouldn't have been removed from the CIP because the CIP committee doesn't remove projects. So
Well,
I'm just saying would add
Oh.
more support to your case that you want to have $36,000 over the next 3 to 4 years. Now you're a year out, so now you're really looking at 3 more. So you're 4 years out to get those tables straightened out. I understand your rationale there, but that didn't quite work.
yeah, I was.
Right, but Sue, I don't think
we.
we didn't approve this for Dawn's budget last year. I mean, it doesn't really work like that anyway.
I know, but
but-
somebody removed it. Somebody removed the expenditure. Is that correct, Dawn?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, these things happen, but what we did is just resubmit it this year. You're right, probably had we gone a different approach, it would have had a different way of being considered.
You might have got a little
It
bit
might have been
more
better off.
ammunition to say, wait a minute, the CIP people let it go through. Obviously, the budget committee supported this plan, and now you're taking it out of my budget. Just saying.
Yeah.
I'll shut up
Traditionally, we
now.
used to do it a lot differently. In the past, we had a same amount all the time in there, and we would replace a few tables a year with it, or chairs, or whatever it was we needed. But then we did a needs-based type of approach and
Yeah, I
changed the
know.
way we built our budgets. And in doing that, it created longer for us to get to the point where we had a need that we would budget for in this fashion. We had a lot of the tables come of age quickly. So, we're looking at some safety issues that we're going to encounter if we don't replace these.
Yep, which
So
just
we
adds,
could do another thing. I don't know if it makes sense to change that figure, bring it lower, and at least, start to replace some of the worst
well,
first.
if you could get the threshold under 10,000 and then leave it in your replacement line and hope that somebody doesn't manipulate your replacement line someplace else at another level.
Well, I'll speak with Jeff and see what approach the district wants to take. And,
Jeff.
but it's something we can consider changing.
Yes.
Jeff, were these tables somehow cut out during our trimming exercise that we did last year? I don't recall going after that line, but
Yeah,
can you speak to this at all?
I'm looking at that right now, so if you give me a moment, I can pull it up and see. Obviously, there were cuts in that line, and there were some other priorities, I believe, for equipment in that budget. But this committee ultimately, was able to approve whatever recommendations are made.
This is the
Why don't you,
replacement
Jeff,
equip-
I don't want to rush you. Why don't you, go ahead, Sue, sorry.
This is the replacement equipment line, looking at the codes for the high school equipment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Jeff, why don't you take your time and look that up? We'll,
No.
if anyone else has any questions for Dawn, oh, go ahead.
I will say that was a draft 2. That was an early cut, I believe, last year, very early. That was just a second round cut last year. And it was 15,000, I believe, last year.
A cut,
Okay.
a cut at the administrative level, not at the committee level, right?
Well, Sue, when there's a directive given or a request given to administration to make cuts, this committee is not really at liberty to criticize those cuts if they've approved them. I know you weren't on the committee last year, but if you don't like, this committee requests that administration propose cuts, they don't like them, tell me, and we'll do something else.
Whoa, Bud, tone. I'm talking from the CIP point of view. Should have been in the CIP. I'm not criticizing administration. I just want to get the tables for Dawn.
It sounds
I
like
agree.
you
We
should-
want to get the table. So if Dawn, I'll just tell you, if these fell out last year when we were trying to meet a certain number, then I apologize, and we will try to we will definitely take that into consideration this year. And to echo what Sue's saying, if we can get these plus future years wrapped up into getting all your tables in the CIP, then I think we should probably try that as well, right? Maybe we can make up for lost time and get these on the CIP, which you are on that committee, right, Sue? So what can we do to try to get these included in the CIP?
I think Sue's
Sue?
muted.
I am on the CIP. I will speak to this if and when we have a meeting. I just want to help Don get his tables sometime when we ever get
Great.
back to school.
Perfect. On that, we agree. Yeah. So, Dawn, on the tables, have you found yourself in less need of these tables with the population in the school?
We would have had to use them if we came back to 4 days in December, as opposed to the hybrid that we're in right now with the 2 cohorts that are in the building. We're able to use the student desks now that we took out of classrooms to keep people socially distanced in classrooms. And that's where the kids eat in the cafeteria at student desks, because we
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Dawn?
Nope.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time tonight. And how are things going, Dawn, in the school? Well, I'm sure this is the first for you, as it is for everybody else in your career. Probably never thought you were going to see what you're seeing now day to day. But are you holding up okay there in the high school? The kids, kids adjusting to this calamity that we're all living through?
I'm sorry, I just got blocked out. I just came back. I don't know if it's heard the last part of that.
I was just asking how things are going at the high school with the kids and this virus, and this is probably an unprecedented thing. You've never seen it before, and neither of any of us. How's it?
But
How you holding up?
You'd be so proud of our kids. They are unbelievable. We've had the best behaviors. They've done everything we've asked. They wear their masks, no complaints. The hallways are quiet. The cafeteria is wonderful. The kids can talk there. They point the desks in the direction they want and create squares and whatnot, but they have to keep their desk above a little dot on the floor. As long as they do that, they can point in any direction. It's a quieter atmosphere. It's very interesting, but the kids have been great. The teachers are really doing a good job with keeping them going, trying to do a lot of things at once, dealing with students that are in front of them and students at home at the same time. But the kids have been fabulous. We've had kids that just appreciate being there so much that they'll do anything they can to make it work.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's been
Great to hear.
very interesting, and there's some real positives in terms of the culture of caring that's going on in the school. We haven't had any discipline. I mean, none. It's been a very different type of challenge. It's all been about keeping kids focused, keeping their spirits up. There are kids that struggle with this. There's a lot of isolation for kids who are spending a lot more time remote. It's tough on a lot of levels, but it's also reassuring from perspective of an educator to see the character of our kids when we really need them to play fair and nice and respectfully, and do the things that they clean up after every class. They do everything they can to keep the place safe, and we appreciate it so much.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Great to hear. Well, thank you, Don. Have a good night. And we are going to move on to the next thing on our agenda, and that is student services and special education. I believe, is that Sarah? Thank you, Don.
No, no, not Sarah. This is our
Oh, Jeff.
Yep, our Director of Pupil Personnel Services is not able to be at the meeting this evening, and I will do my very best to get through this budget presentation and explain what information I have for this budget. And at our next budget meeting, we may want to include this, and in fact, I would suggest including this on the next agenda to have a further presentation on it and to address any questions that we may have. So I'm going to be presenting both for student services and for special education. So as you can see, the budget between current year $3,400,000, is compared with a proposed budget of $3,744,000, so it's an increase of $339,000. Of that, we've got some minor increases just relating to different services and contracts we're involved in. On the 2134 line of the professional services nurses, SNAP updates and transition to cloud iPad use. So SNAP is the program that our school nurses use, and believe that the iPad use really increases efficiency for our nurses. It just brings they're able to operate a little bit more on the fly in situations that they can't have a computer right in front of them. Contracted services for our school psychologist up $3,000 for specialized evaluations for students. Some of those are going up. Obviously, we're seeing an increase in demand and anticipate that would continue. A little bit of a decrease in the homeless transportation line, 12,000 reduction there, just based on our annual trends in alignment with spending. So our tuition lines, and these are the big lines really, and we'll go down and look at these in total and whole. But for now, we're looking at between all of these lines, elementary tuition, outside tuition, middle school tuition, and high school tuition. We're looking at significant increases: $206,000 for elementary, $55,000 for middle school, $318,000 for high school. Now, this is offset with a reduction of $242,000 in our residential cost in high school. And this is based on what we know to be the reasonable needs based on our current population. And we built in, and this is the time of the year that I always am optimistic that I can come back and say, well, we've had a few reductions in our needs or in our placements or in our prospects for the following year, and we'd like to take this down a little bit. And it turns out that when I looked into what we can do with this line now, we're actually pretty much up against fully dedicated funding, which doesn't leave a lot of extra room, doesn't leave a lot of room here for additional move-ins and other placements. Now we always hedge a little bit that if we have a couple students who may need services, maybe we'll have a couple students move out. We do take into consideration students who are going to age out, and even that's not necessarily guaranteed next year, because there's a possibility that the age for aging out, if you will, may go from 21 to 22. I believe that was on the agenda for the state this past year, which would put a little bit of an increased burden on the local school districts, ourselves included. So these are big numbers, and they've been big numbers. And as of right now, I don't think that there's a lot of room, and we could end up in a good situation. Perhaps we're able to get a lot of students back into district. Perhaps we'll have some move-outs. Perhaps the overall burden will decrease. The thing that I'm slightly dubious of going into next year is the impact that this year is having on the need for placements. And if placements become necessary this year as a result of the remote and / pandemic environment we're in, perhaps some needs may not be able to be met, or there may be a greater impact on some of our population. We may end up having to have those services into next year, and then try and work some of the students that we can back into the district and district services. So these are some of the bigger lines you'll see for increases, I think, in the overall entire budget. And realistically, it would be best, I think, to have our director speak to this if she can make the next meeting, to be able to help us understand if this is in fact, a fair number based on her observations up until that point. So that's it. So a majority of the increases in the budget are going to be caught up just in those outside tuition lines. And I'm going to go down to those lines in the actual budget reports to put some perspective on the trending there, so the committee can have a look. And we have some additional schedules to take a look at as well. I'm just going to see if I can fit them all here. So you see the increase of 206,000. You can see where this has been trending. Increase in middle school placement. You can see this has been trending. And placements for high school. You can see where that's been trending up. So some of the students from middle school may be going to high school, some additional students may be moving in, and we do have a reduction here for residential, which I think is a good thing. So that's that. Are there any questions on the student services budget?
Anyone?
Nope, all set.
I'm
Very
good.
good. So I'll move now on to the special education budget, and I don't want to make anyone car sick, so I apologize. Let's get down here. There's the total increase. Okay, so the special education budget. You can see current year budget 2.285, proposed budget 2.236. So we're down about 49,199, and a big driver in that reduction line itself is a reduction in contracted services, which you see right here, of about $70,000, where our behavioral interventions and transition services needs have been reduced. We can reduce the budget. We do have an anticipated increase in special education transportation. So special education transportation will be going to bid this year. So we can, based on a reasonable estimate of 7% increase, and make them less than that, have included enough in the budget to cover that potential need. And special education is a little bit different than regular education transportation in the sense that sometimes you don't get the benefit of the pricing that you get on regular education in district. The pricing structure is a little bit different. Sometimes it's by a certain number of hours. You might get a morning trip, an afternoon trip. It may exceed, because you're off campus and out of the district, you may exceed the total amount allowed for a daily ride charge. So you may actually get into additional charges as a result of that. These are all things that can come up in these contracts, and so it may not just be a 7% increase in cost or rate alone. We have other factors to look into there as well, which we try and mitigate or prevent, but sometimes the bids will come in just that way. So we had looked at extended year school year transportation, and really based on the trending, that number's come down to $46,150. General education supplies up $3,500. Nothing major till we get into info access fees for special education, $65.93. Zoom Health online offers some HIPAA protection for counselors, social workers, early learning Seesaw. Some of the tools that we found to be very effective in the current environment, we'd like to continue using. So some increases, some decreases, nothing really major beyond that. So, and I think you'll see contracted services here. That was that reduction, and you can see based on the trend there, we're still, and we'll see where we're at as we get further on into the year. But you can see where we're at with these services, and this might be an area for opportunity as we approach the really the end of the budget cycle, which is coming up quickly. So the $60,000 for special education transportation. See the actuals: 818, 887, 918. Budget this year is 869. Obviously, we're in a very odd year in terms of transportation with a little bit of a decreased demand, which is helpful, but not really allowing us to provide the services we need. So the extended year transportation, I'm just going to bring up the actuals on this, the ESY transportation. You can see their actual here 112, actual of 100, actual of 116. See our voted budget of 122. So we're looking at a much higher number here based on an anticipated need that we didn't have last year, since we didn't do much transporting, or in the current year we didn't have much transporting. So that amount's been brought down as well. So if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Jeff?
All set.
And is the committee interested in having Susan be included on the agenda for our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Sherman, would you like that as well? I'm going to assume yes.
Yes, I would. I think we should we're seeing the other department heads. If she's able to be here, that would be great.
Yep. Okay. Moving on, last but not least, Gary with Maintenance and Facilities.
Good evening.
Welcome, Gary.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, Doug. So as you can see on the screen, the current year budget, 163,906. Proposed budget is 1,755,609 with an increase of 116,703. We did some. Oh, bless you.
God bless you.
Good thing we're 6 feet apart.
We did some extensive research through our current budget. This is the first year that I've been in this position going through this budget. So we meticulously went through it to see where we could decrease or what our needs were. As you can see in the first line item, other professional services, we went through there and reallocated some funding that was in the wrong area. That's why you see the decrease of the 27,700. It should have been somewhere else, which we determined, and that's why you see that decrease. General repair facilities, as a trend, as you'll see later on, we've been trending higher. Aging buildings, they're asking for more TLC, and we've been trending a little higher. So we've been low on that budget and reallocating funds as well for that one. You see the increase for supply line. What we did was we created new supply lines for every school. generally we had one supply line that covered the district. We thought it would better be tracked to find out what schools are using, how many supplies a year, what they're using. So it's easier for us to track it. And that's why we allocated funds for elementary schools. We have at 21,600 based on trend of what they've been spending per year. You'll see that number also continue down to the Timberlane Middle School, 48,000. And then again at the high school, 55,000. And then the PAC, usually they're running right around $5,000, $4,900 a year. So that's why you see all these increases is because we just reallocated the general supply fund and we broke it out to try and maintain some stability where we can keep track of everything. Next item you'll see, or the next one was the decrease of 131,000. That's just that reallocation of all those funds to the different accounts. The next one you'll see is a decrease for the information access services. That's our school dude. That's our work order program. And again, based on trend, I think it was budgeted a little high. So what we've done is we've gone back the past 3 years, see what we spent on that. And that's why we came up with a number of the decrease of 2,000. New equipment, maintenance. We have every school has a washer and dryer. Danville's the only one without one. And it's time that they get one as well, especially now with the cleaning schedule that we have and the amount of, I'm going to guess, microfiber rags we have. We're washing every night to have the classrooms reuse them. So they're in desperate need of a washer and dryer. So we put that in the new equipment line. Replacement equipment, we have slated a mini split in one of the schools, the middle school, and at the Pollard School, we have a floor scrubber that is on its way out, end of life. So we added that to the replacement equipment line as well. Contract services, you'll see that we have a $23,000 decrease in that line. And again, that was gone through and looked at to see where the funds were going and to see what contractors were coming in. And some of the contractors were for sites or were for building renos. So based on trend and based on the numbers that we had, we thought a $23,000 decrease would still cover us, leaving funds in that line. Now, the next one is replacement equipment grounds. I know I just heard Sue talking about the tables with the high school. We did talk about this, Mr. Dowd and myself, and I know that this came up at the CIP on vehicle replacement. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get a cycle where we're replacing a piece of equipment, every year. We do have aging equipment in the grounds. All of our mowers except for one are 15 to 16 years old. They're constantly being repaired. So we want to get on a cycle where we can replace it. I believe this is going to have to go into the CIP, and I'm sure Sue will nod her head yes or no. But I think that's where we are with the replacement equipment for grounds. Same thing with the vehicle. My understanding now is that it's a capital expense. We're going to have to, I believe at the last capital meeting, we did put that in there. So I believe that may come out of this one, as Sue has indicated, with anything over 10,000. And the last one is our alarm monitoring. Based on trend, looking over the years, we haven't spent what we've spent original or budgeted, so that's why we went down $1,500. That pretty much wraps it up. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Gary. Anyone with questions for Gary?
I'm all set.
All right.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we appreciate your time, Gary.
I'm all set.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you guys are as busy as you ever have been, Gary, with all this that's going on around us. And
Yeah.
we appreciate you, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Todd. That's well received.
So just a couple quick notes, Todd, before we move on from the facilities budget itself. Just moving on through here, and CIP is still finishing its work. And so what we've done is tentatively in our larger capital lines, simply level funded them. You'll see sites at 150, building renovations district-wide at 892. So as that plan gets finalized, we will be able to better shore up what's actually behind those numbers when the CIP gets finalized. And I'll go into a little bit more of what might be complicating that in just a moment during the administrator's report. So
Okay.
there are a couple things going on beyond what we already know. So
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you to all the presenters, those who have already left us and are still on. We appreciate your time, all of you. And with that, and on what you just said, Jeff, you are next with the administrator's report. Administrative report.
all right, thank you, Todd. So first, I'm going to share out, maybe to help the board, help the committee better plan, or plan generally. This is the legal calendar for the upcoming budget annual meeting cycle. So really by January 6th, and if you recall, we'll go through the process of having a public hearing, and we'll go through the process then of having the deliberative session after that. So this is the district calendar. You'll see the deliberative session is down here on Thursday, February 4th. Voting day down here, March 9th. And just going back up to the top to where the budget committee really falls in here. Wednesday, January 6th, post the public notice of the school board budget hearing 7 days in advance. So we'll want to have the budget, at least for the public hearing, finalized well before that, or before that anyway. Some time for citizens petitions, finalization of cost items for CBAs, and then the public hearing itself on January 14th. I don't know exactly what form, the location, what form that will be this year. So
for those of you who maybe didn't watch the school board meeting, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but Mr. O'Neill brought it up at the school board meeting the other night, and it's very up in the air. I don't know how we're going to pull this off. I think most complicated is the deliberative session, but literally everything I'm seeing on this table here is making me wonder how this is all going to work. But we're all in this together.
Any of us who have sat at the table, particularly at the public hearing in the PAC, know that it is right literally shoulder to shoulder, and so I don't know how distancing would be available to us. If you've seen the school board meetings, the school board is pretty well spread out, and that takes up pretty much all the stage. So yeah, I'm not sure, but stay tuned. Stay tuned. So
yeah, I think that the most interesting thing is more the deliberative and the voting, and how that's going to work with the entire district. Hopefully, we'll be in a totally different situation by then. I pray.
I appreciate your optimism.
Anyway, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
So that's that. Are there any questions? I don't know if this is helpful for board discussion on your budget development process, or just something helpful to keep in mind. I wanted to put it out there for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, Todd, you had also raised, I think, a question at one point about us having had some expenses related to COVID.
Unexpected expenses. Yes.
Yeah. So there are two discussions here. I just want to have them briefly, and I want to keep them separate to some degree. I don't know if you can see, am I sharing out here? I think I am an executive summary that went to the board. Can you see this executive summary? Went to the school board?
I just see your face.
All right, let me share it
I
out.
don't see it yet, no.
How's that?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about two separate things. One is expenses, and I want to just put those aside for a second. The other would be some potential revenue sources that it's interesting for the board to know. And so I'd like to go through what those are. We have several different grants that have come in or become available. One is a CARES ESSER grant that everyone's heard about. That's been around for a while. Total on that allocated to the district is $124,010. Spending by 9/30/2021. The SPSRF, which is these Supplemental Public School Relief Fund, where the $200 per student grant from the state with federal funding is in at $652,000. So this is posing some problems for us because the spending on that has to be made, completed, and done by 12/30/2020. So really, we would like to get as much into that as we can, but in terms of major facilities work, repairs, and that sort of thing, we're somewhat limited. But it's important, I think, for the budget committee to know the revenue picture in case it comes up. We do have a remote learning grant as well, another smaller amount. We obviously have some money coming in to support our from the USDA to support our lunch program, which is great. But anyway, those are some of the grants that are coming in. Are there any questions on the grants? I think we're go ahead.
I don't think you can predict the future, Jeff, but you know, my concern here is that this is not going to be available next year, but the expense side of things may still be relevant for us next year. Yeah.
We're not planning on that. We're planning on a hopefully business as usual, getting back into the buildings. And bear in mind that a lot of the money that's being used here will be used for things that are outside of our budget. And so that's another slight complicating factor. So the idea here is that if we budgeted it, it would not be paid for out of a grant, even if it's useful during COVID or coronavirus. So by way of example, and I don't want to jump to the expenses too quickly, but if we look, the board authorized some pandemic floating staff to be able to be brought in. We had a reasonable estimate here of $838,888. That's unbudgeted. That's a specific COVID-related expense. So expenses associated with the pandemic floaters up until 12/30 would be able to be reimbursed by that SPSRF, the $200 per student grant. We still have some funding after that as well through the CARES Act funding, but that's an example of splitting it, that we have an expense that was not anticipated, it was not budgeted. We may get some reimbursement. We'll get some reimbursement on some of it up until 12/30. So other things.
Jeff, do you think that this is just postulating here, but do you think, based on the current climate in our country, in our region, how things are spiking back up, that there's a chance that SPSRF could be extended, or is that just it is what it is and that's it at the end of the year?
Yeah, up until now, Todd, I've been rather optimistic that there would be additional funding coming, and I think this was what it was. The only problem with it is it came in, and I'm not complaining, but it came in, and we just really found out the details. I think the governor had announced it maybe a month ago, but you really don't know. And these grants are very tricky. So, for example, the criteria for expenses that are not budgeted, for expenditures, it can be retroactive to March, but the expenditures have to be made by 12/30. So you're not going to plan maybe a big capital project that you could really use unless you have several months to send it out to bid and have the work completed. So it's a little bit of a complicating factor in that regard. So.
Right, but that $838,888 there for pandemic floaters is going to go, most likely is going to go beyond 12/30, right? So then what funds that?
We do have,
we're talking.
Yes, I feel like I need a drum roll. So I'm going to go down to our total. I'm just going to skip, again, the expenses, handle them separately. Again, we looked at the remote learning grant. talked about that. Not a lot of money. GARES talked about that. SPSRF talked about that. Great. So we may realize a discount with First Student with our busing company because we're getting a bit of a discount based on lack of use, I guess, and a reduced volume. And we're getting a discount on those days that we don't drive. The idea is that our drivers will continue to be paid, but obviously there's some variable costs that we should be recovering on those days that the buses aren't running. That's reasonable. And we also have, and this is the drum roll part, we also have a refund from Health Trust. I don't know if anyone on this meeting, recalls any of these Health Trust refunds coming in the past. They haven't come in lately. Health Trust is our health insurance company, if you will, our provider, and it's a not-for-profit. It is a entity that serves a lot of municipal and state agencies. And when Health Trust runs into a situation that they have, and I won't say a profit, when they have a surplus themselves, when their revenues exceed their expenditures, they use those excess revenues to build up a reserve. When that reserve is fully filled, if you will, when that completed, when that's at their actuarial limits, they will then provide a refund to the district of an amount that involves their overpayment. So our Health Trust refund is anticipated at about $465,000 to the district. So that's a nice unanticipated.
It's kind of like the car insurance companies that are all giving money back now because they've reached their actuarial limits, yes?
Correct, yeah, or it would become exorbitant for them to keep it, but
correct.
It would be unconscionable for them to keep it. In the case of Health Trust, we had a couple of years where their reserves continued to bounce up a little bit, so any surplus they ended up putting into their reserves, but they must be at their max, so we're getting a little bit of a refund on that. So
okay,
right. So even though, and I'm not sure that those, for example, those pandemic floaters are actually going to come in at 838. I think that's probably a high number at this point, but we do have some offsets, as you can see down here.
okay.
We have some positions that we're just having a hard time filling, like generally, so we have some savings there as well. So overall, when you look at where we're at, and I think we have 2.2 million in potential expenditures related to the current pandemic environment. Well, yes, that might be true, but realistically, we have some offsets. We have some additional unexpected and unanticipated revenue coming in. And so realistically, we're not really in a vastly dark place in terms of expenses and revenue. So knock wood, I just hope that continues. One quick note as well, some of the expenses that we're incurring or we've incurred up to right now, we're assuming that this isn't going to continue next year. But if it does, okay, do we need some additional staff coverage? Do we need some, either pandemic floaters? We also have some incentives for the teachers who are in the buildings to cover extra classes, for our paras to offer some additional coverage. But in some of these costs, technology, for example, might be one, but some of them are going to be strictly this year. So we're looking to maybe undertake some HVAC repairs, some air quality, testing, further testing. So realistically, those aren't expenses that would continue on even if we were in this similar environment, which is not the idea. I certainly hope that we're not in that environment, in this environment next year. So I hope that sheds some light on it. It was just interesting that, 2.2 million, we're okay. We've got some coverage. So I hope this is
Where's
helpful.
the, like all the PPE expenses? Are those in, what line would those be lumped into here?
Those are scattered throughout. You'll see that there's a lot in the different
Okay.
schools and different programs. So we've really broken it down in that way. So we'd expected the possibility of some additional PPE funding to come in from the Department of Homeland Security, and that just didn't happen, and that's okay. We found some other resources. So just as an FYI, you'll see that we have some credits down below, for example, for transportation, that we're going to have a bit of a discount. I've listed this discount not as net. I've listed that discount as the gross discount. You see up here, transportation, we actually will have some additional expenditures relating to particularly sanitizing our buses on a routine basis. So you can see what the actual expense is and what the actual offset is below.
Okay. Thank you for this, Jeff. Does anyone have any questions for Jeff on this?
Thank you.
Can
Jeff.
you scroll back up real quick, Jeff, just so I can see what the SPSRF stands for?
Yeah. Supplemental Public School Response Fund. Sorry, it's a relief fund, response fund. AKA $200 per student fund. I do have some concerns that that's an awful lot of money to spend before 12:30. So
Yes.
we're gonna do what we can do. And if it's not spent, I believe that we would have to return a portion of it, but I think that there will be a subsequent reallocation of that back out to the district. So we're not alone in that concern. Most of the business administrators and districts in the state are up against a similar challenge of trying to spend the funding by 12:30. So, and the way this grant is set up, sometimes I can get on different grants that we have, IDEA and Title I, we can get some relief directly from the DOE to bypass, let's say, purchasing procedures for a particular option that we can't get anywhere else, and they'll actually allow us to go past their purchasing requirements. Well, with this SPSRF fund, I don't really have the ability to go by their purchasing requirements. So when I can't get a blessing or consent from the DOE to bypass and try and expedite that expenditure. So there are just a number of challenges somehow that this presents, but we're doing the very best we can to make sure that we can get the best value for the district.
Great. Anything else in your administrative report?
I believe that is it. I do believe that Maria Watkins is on the call, and I believe that the school board did make an announcement at their last meeting that they were interested in working with Maria going forward, and as not going forward after July 1, well, actually after January 1st, in a BA capacity for Timberlane. And I anticipate that I would be still with the district until on or about June 30th of next year. Hempstead has expressed an interest in my providing services to their district. So I don't think anything's absolutely finalized one way or the other, but I'll just put that out there as I'm sure some questions have been raised about that. So that's a little bit of that plan going forward. Kind of a win-win for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and welcome, Maria, and congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's move on to reports of committees. Brian is not here, so we're not going to hear a school board report from him tonight. But Sue, I think you kind of already gave us a report, which is you haven't met since our last budget committee meeting for CIP, correct?
Can't hear you.
We had a meeting and it got canceled. I haven't spoken to the chair of the committee since that point about it, so we'll just hang on. I believe in the
Okay.
CIP, so.
I know you do. I do too. All right, fantastic. We will then move on to unfinished business. Special education private tuition actual expense. Is this now going to the 24th when she can join us, Jeff? Or I saw something in the packet.
And it might be good to actually discuss this. I'll share it real quick. And I don't know. We're trying awful hard here to see if we can get the right information here in front of the board. And so what we've done here is provided just a 2-year, just to see if this is the spirit of what we've been looking for in the past, of student counts or students served by account, so by program, elementary, middle, and high school for tuition, private and other. So out of district placements, basically. And you'll see that the total amounts there, student count, average cost per student. Big caveat there that the average cost per student reflects total expenditure divided by total student count. Actual expenditure per student varies greatly depending on student needs and programs. So really, there's a very wide range of actual expenditures. I don't know if this is what we're looking for, and I figured that, you know what, we'll put a couple of years out here of actuals to see. You can see the trending 38, 19 to 52 in 2020. This doesn't provide necessarily the same full-time equivalent to FTE that we looked at before. What this provides is number of students served, if you will. This doesn't mean a student was served all year. It means a student was served enough to merit expenditure. I don't know if you have any other comments on this, Maria.
No, that's exactly what you just said is the point that I wanted to make clear, because obviously FT is one thing, and especially FT as of October 1st, as it is required by the Department of Education, that count is completely different of this. This is the number of students that incurred any kind of service throughout the year for which we paid for.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the count that we're providing here.
Yeah.
Is that what you?
So is this more in line with
Yes.
with what you were looking for? Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. That should help you see better where that huge big difference is. I don't care if we send a kid one day, it costs something to send that kid, and that added to that total amount. So thank you for doing that, Jeff. That's what I was looking for.
So
52 kids.
So is this good? We can get another year or two maybe going backward, but we really haven't tracked these expenditures. If we can get can we go any further back, Maria?
I don't think the system, so the system, the way I understand it, I work with Lucy on this, and again, Susan is not in, so Lucy has been an angel helping me get these numbers, but obviously it's not her position or her ability to get this. But my understanding is the system that they use in the special education, you cannot go back years to get the student population.
Yeah. But it shows that contrast. I don't think we need to go back.
It does.
Back to again, it's apples and oranges, but
the other thing is that these programs are so different. Each child is so different that, you know, even the average cost per student, you can get an average, but it really depends what the needs of the students are in any particular year. So
right. Yep. Thank you.
Certainly.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Maria, for assisting putting that together.
No problem. My pleasure.
Okay. Last and final thing on the agenda, other business. Do we have any other business?
Not that I know of.
I don't think we do. Anything on anyone's mind that they'd like to throw out there on the committee?
Nothing here.
All right. With that, I think it's time to call it, folks. Appreciate everyone being on here tonight. And the next meeting, as you can see in the agenda, is Tuesday, November the 24th. So we are going to go ahead and adjourn at 8:41 p.m.